The Hour of Joy is one of Poppy Playtime's most horrific events, and one of the most important moments in the entire game's lore. It's been referenced countless times by theorists and hidden throughout the game itself. Today, we're uncovering what really happened and the terrifying truth behind it. So hey everybody, I'm Jeeps, and let's get right into it. To start, Poppy Playtime is a huge game, and if you're a fan of the community, you're bound to have heard of this moment more than once. So I'll summarize it before we look into the fine details. Essentially, the Hour of Joy was the toy uprising or rebellion within Playtime Co. It took place on August 8th, 1995, where every staff member, scientist, and supposedly the executives were all killed and went missing. At least according to the note we were given at the beginning of Chapter 1, and characters like Poppy who give us more information on it. From Poppy, we learned that major toys like Catnap, Huggy Wuggy, and Mommy Longlegs, who we meet in the games, they tried and kill us, all took part in the uprising, killing the staff. This is backed by the Hour of Joy VHS tape, which she shows us at the end of Chapter 3. And from what we see, the aftermath was horrifying. Hundreds, maybe even thousands of bodies littered throughout the entire facility, but clearly gone 10 years later when we returned. Gosh guys, I wonder how that happened. Now it may seem like we know everything about this event, about what the toys did, but how could this event actually occur? If you've seen the game before, you'll know that this factory is huge and it would be impossible to initiate something like this. The Playtime facility wasn't reckless either. They had protocols, security measures, and these systems keeping everything in place, something we specifically hear from the warden in Chapter 4.
How could this happen? There's fail-safes, security measures. It's impossible.
So how could such a catastrophic event slip through the fingers of Playtime Co? Well, the truth is, this all started with someone on the inside. Someone you might not expect. You see, Playtime Co. was extremely secretive. Even regular employees were under strict contracts that prevented them from sharing important information, or just information in general, which is kinda sketchy for a toy company, right? But it made sense knowing what we know about the killer toys and everything. And alongside this, some people already suspected what was going on, and others were quietly against the company, but that was far and few between. But when it came to their executives, they were told everything and given 100% access throughout the entire facility, using tools like the Omni Hand, which granted executive access. This is important because if there were already high security protocols in effect before the Hour of Joy, someone with power had to have been responsible for disabling security and countermeasures, allowing the plan to proceed smoothly. And not just that, someone who clearly didn't favor the company in its entirety would be needed for everything to work perfectly, and the experiments had just the person in mind. But we'll hold that for a moment. Now, before, I thought this was purely a plan by the prototype. Toys like Huggy Wuggy and Mommy Longlegs were already out and about, so of course they could easily execute their plan, especially since the prototype was able to communicate to them. But then I saw a video from our friend Game Theory and they proved some really good points. Long story short, an executive named Stella Graber, who was in charge of Playcare, the orphanage in Chapter 2, could have been manipulated by the prototype to set the toys and children free. But as we know, this didn't happen, because in Chapter 4, Poppy tells us that the prototype lied and that they were forced to stay.
I thought we were gonna leave the factory. Not this. All those people. Prototype says we can't leave. Not now, not ever.
This really gives me a different outlook on the events in the timeline and how everything actually proceeded. But what evidence is there to prove that this was actually the case? And more importantly, why? Well, Stella, as I mentioned, was in charge of Playcare, also known as the orphanage, which took care of the children deep below the factory. And like the other executives, like Leith Pierre, Eddie Ritterman, or Harley Sawyer, Stella was very kind-hearted and disagreed with the motives behind Playtime Co.'s actions. We see this through a variety of tapes throughout the chapter. These tapes show Stella's contributions to Playtime Co., but also a lingering emotion of sympathy, especially for the many victims from experiments conducted by Playtime Co. We see this in a tape where Stella is talking to individuals interested in adopting a child, but the child is quote-unquote testing. Strange, right? And after the theater incident, a tape is shown with all the executives talking, but Stella's thoughts are clearly disregarded.
Those poor people. Did we really have to...
did what was necessary, Miss Graber.
There are many more instances like this in documents, tapes, and the point is made clear. so we can see her sympathy and care in action. But because of her position, the consequences of disobedience, and who she was surrounded by, she stayed quiet. So is it unreasonable to think that the prototype learned of this and found a way to communicate with her, reasoning with her, and manipulating her, leading to the factory's demise? Not really. But of course that's all speculation. However, I do believe that someone was on the inside, because with the known security measures, the experiments would have either been recontained or been eliminated with little to no catastrophic results. But that leaves one final question. What actually happened after the Hour of Joy, and did anyone survive? Well, if you look closely at the Hour of Joy VHS tape from earlier, you can clearly see the aftermath and the amount of employees who were killed during the event. And from what we've seen throughout the 4 chapters of the game, you can tell the facility was heavily damaged in some places more than others. I mean, what more could you expect from hundreds of killer toys breaking loose from a prison? But did anyone actually survive? And could you even survive this? Well, as far as we know, nobody survived the Hour of Joy, and you'd have to have been extremely lucky to as well. Although some individuals like Harley Sawyer technically did, I don't believe any of the executives managed to make it out because of the chaos and the vast massiveness of this facility. And as for Harley Sawyer, he was only lucky enough to live because he was turned into an experiment before the Hour of Joy and useful to the prototype after these events, which we see in a VHS tape called Time. Anyways, before I ramble off, although there were some theories regarding Leith Pierre surviving, who was the CEO after Elliot Ludwig passed away, there is a possibility that Project Playtime took place before the Hour of Joy rather than after. And if this is the case, then the executives alongside Leith Pierre most likely didn't make it out alive. And for those wondering, Project Playtime was a spin-off game created by Mob Entertainment, which showed Leith Pierre sending resource extractionists to gather toy parts and possibly seal off experiments, which is exactly why this game plays a large role in determining whether he lived. However, if this theory is wrong, and the game takes place after the Hour of Joy like I thought before, then there's a very good possibility a large group of the employees were able to survive. However, at this point in the timeline, so far, the only employee we know who actually survived for sure is the main character. But I'm sure we'll gather the last pieces to this puzzle in the final chapter of the game. So yeah, the Hour of Joy was a planned inside job and one of the most important events in all of Poppy Playtime, laying the foundation for the games where we arrived 10 years later. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, consider watching this next one right here. And as always, I'm Jeeps, and I'll see you next time.